We have now come to the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms is different from the other books of the Old Testament or of the Bible because most of the Psalms are actually prayers to God. Instead of God's word to us, it is human words to God. And we need to read them as prayers to God. Now, how do we make sense of the Psalms as prayers to God? It's so diversified. There's all kinds of Psalms, all kinds of emotions. How do we make sense of what it is really all about? And can we really pray these Psalms, as our prayers? Are they model prayers? Yes, they are. But how do we make sense of these Psalms as our model prayers? How do we use them in our lives as believers in the New Covenant? Well, we will look at the very first Psalm, because the first Psalm sets the tone. It gives us an idea what the Psalms are for and how they are to be used. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of the sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, and yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. Now, blessed means happy. Fortunate is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, meaning who do not yield to the thinking, the way of thinking of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners who live the life of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers who are like scoffers. Now, we can compare this to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Do not be conformed to this world. Okay? Present your bodies as a living sacrifice because of what Christ has done. But having done that, do not be conformed to this world. Conformed to this world would be to walk in the counsel of the world, to stand in the way of the world, and sit in the seat of the world, including scoffers, those who will mock God. These are different degrees of being against God. Romans 12 also say, instead of being conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And most people think to be transformed by the renewing of mind involves meditating on God's word. And now we see a parallel here in Psalm verse 2. Instead of being conformed to this world, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. So we see some parallel, and it gives us an idea how we might be transformed by the renewing of the mind. Here it is to meditate day and night on the law of the Lord. Now the question is, what is the law of the Lord? And what does it mean to meditate? First of all, the Hebrew word translated meditate does not mean silent meditation. The same Hebrew word is used in Psalm 2 to mean plotting, conspiring. The nation plot against the Son of God. So this plotting is not silent, it involves talking. So in the original context, the meditation is not silent meditation. When Joshua was commanded to meditate on the word of the law of God day and night, it is about reciting it. In the context of the Psalms, they do not have Bibles like we do. They will have to recite based on memory. So this meditation is actually reciting it, saying aloud. Well, there's a place for silent meditation, but the context is to say aloud. In fact, the Psalms are the hymn books, are the hymns of Israel. And the Psalms are actually the hymns of the church until even the 17th century, when the Psalms are replaced by our traditional hymns. So singing, reciting the law of the Lord. Now, the word law, Torah, does not always mean literally law in our understanding. The basic meaning is direction. It can mean the will of God or even the revelation of God. So in other words, this psalm tells us how to be transformed by the renewing of the mind and not be conformed to this world. Is by meditating on the law of God. Strictly speaking, since this is the first psalm, the law of God here covers the entire psalms. Meditating on the psalm, reciting, singing the psalms. So, we are going to look at the book of Psalms, the psalms, and make sense of the psalms as means of being renewed in our mind, be transformed and not conform to this world. So when we understand the psalm, make sense of the psalm in this way, we have a powerful biblical tool for spiritual formation to practice Romans 12, 1-2. Paul doesn't spell out how we're going to do that, but the book of Psalms gives us a tool to do that. Now, to further understand the law of the Lord, look at Psalm 19, which builds on Psalm 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. Now this is about God's natural revelation. God revealed himself through the heavens. When people look at the heavens, they recognize God exists. That is what Romans chapter 1 says. So it is about God's general or natural revelation. Then verse 7 onwards is about God's special revelation. And it is called the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rule of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Now, the law, parallel testimony, precept, commandment, fear, rule, so on. You see, law does not just limit to literally law. Now, this in contrast to the first part of the psalm about natural revelation, this is about God's special revelation. In other words, the law of the Lord in the context of psalm means God's revelation of his word, of his will. We have to meditate on God's revelation of his word. And verse 14 says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Now you see, words of my mouth and meditation of the heart, talking about the same thing. This meditation from the heart comes out as words of my mouth, reciting or singing it. So the Psalms are meant to be recited or sung as a meditation of the heart through the words of our mouth. So this is how the Psalms can be used as a tool, as a means to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And we see what happens when we recite or sing the psalm, how it can transform us, renew our mind. Psalm 119, which builds on Psalm 1 and 19. Very beautiful. 1 and 19 becomes 119. In this stanza of the psalm, the psalmist say, teach me, O Lord, the way of your statutes. And meaning so that I will keep it to the end. Give me understanding that I may keep your law and observe it with my whole heart. Lead me in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. Incline my heart to your testimonies and not to selfish gain. Turn my eyes from looking at worthless things and give me life in your ways. Confirm to your servant your promise that you may be feared. Note again how the law can be statutes, can be commandments, can be testimonies, can be your ways, can be your promise. So you see, basically, God's teaching, God's revelation in his word. Now, look at what the psalmist is praying here. He's asking God to teach him his word so that I will keep it. In other words, there is a desire, there is a goal of keeping his word. And he asked God to teach him in such a way that he will do it. Give me understanding so that I may keep it with my whole heart. He wants to keep God's word with his whole heart, but he asked God to give him understanding in such a way he will do it. In other words, when we are informed about God's word, we may not keep it. We need the kind of understanding that we will keep it. Understand his word in such a way that we will keep it. Then lead me, cause me to walk in the path of your commandments. Incline my heart. Now, when you look at the whole thing, you'll see what is involved. He wants God to teach him his word, summarizing statutes, so on and so on, in such a way that his thinking is changed. His feeling is changed. His willing, his volition, what he wants to do is change, so that his life, his acting is changed. So, you see, he's praying that God will change him totally, change every aspect of him, so that he would indeed keep God's word. So this is crucial. When we are transformed by the renewing of mind, you see, the Greek word mind, like the Hebrew word translated mind or heart, does not mean just mind, it means the whole person. The thinking, the feeling, the willing, the result in the acting. So, taking all the three Psalms, Psalm 119, 119 together, it means the book of Psalms is given to us to meditate, recite, or sing, so that our thinking, our feeling, our willing will change, with the result that our acting will change, will be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So we need to make sense of the book of Psalms in this way. So we begin by looking at how the Psalms fit into the missional framework of the Bible again. Now, note all the highlighted portions, which is most of the framework. All these elements, creation mandate, Noahic Covenant, Ibrahim Covenant, Mosaic Covenant, David Covenant, Messiah, even the Great Commission, are found in the Psalms, in the book of Psalms. So when we look at the Psalms and look at these elements, we see clearly how the book of Psalms fit into this. And we can make some very important implications when we see that the Psalms includes all these elements. The hymn book of Israel, and used to be the hymn book of the church, include all these elements. What does that mean in terms of our singing and our worship? Okay, let's begin with the creation mandate. We have seen this psalm before, Psalm 8. It's about the creation mandate, that God has given man dominion over the works of his hand. I've seen how the book of Hebrews applied this to Jesus Christ, because Christ has come as second Adam to reclaim this mandate so that it can be fulfilled according to his original purpose. So the Psalms include the creation mandate. Then the Noahic Covenant. This is an imaginary assembly where God presides over so-called gods. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals, and you will fall like every other ruler. And the psalmist says, rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your inheritance. Why do I say this is the Noahic Covenant? Remember, I mentioned that when God made the covenant with Noah, that he will not destroy the world like he did before, he instituted government, represented by capital punishment. And the concern is not just capital punishment, it is to uphold justice. God instituted the government so that they will punish evil and praise good to contain evil. Because human beings will still be sinful, God needed government so that people will not become as wicked like in the days of Noah. That resulted in the flood. God will not destroy again, but government is to control that. So that's why when you talk about defend the unjust, the wicked, this is referring to government, the institute of government, to punish evil and to uphold good. And they are called gods. This is referring to human rulers. Why I say human? Because human rulers are called to do this. Defend the unjust, defend the weak, and so on. Why are they called gods? Well, in the very institution of government, God say government are to exercise capital punishment. Those who commit murder, they need to pay by their own life. That is how it summarizes the entire institution of government. Only government rulers are given the prerogative to take life, as in capital punishment. That prerogative is God's, but God has given that to human rulers for His purpose, to punish evil and praise good. So, in that sense, they are gods. But human governments have been corrupted because of sin. So this psalm also incorporates the idea of sin, the fall. And rise up, judge the nations. We saw in Isaiah 24 that one day God will judge the earth, as well, including the kings. That comes under the Noahic Covenant. So we see the Noahic Covenant is included in the Psalms. Next comes the Abrahamic Covenant. He remembered His covenant forever, the word that He commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant that He made with Abraham, His sworn promise to Isaac, which He promised to Jacob as a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for your inheritance. And He gave them the lands of the nations, and they took possession of the fruit of people's labors, that they might keep His statutes and observe His laws. You see, it moves into the Mosaic Covenant. Why did God take them out of Egypt, gave them Canaan? So that they might keep His law, so that they may build a national civilization that is consistent with God's will, keep His laws. So you see how the Abraham Covenant is applied into the Mosaic Covenant. That is what I have seen before. That we see in the chart, the missional framework, and the Psalms captures that. Now we look at the Mosaic Covenant. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, and He commanded our fathers to teach their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God and keep His commandments. That is basically the Mosaic Covenant. But when you read further down, suddenly you see He rejected the tent of Joseph and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but He chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which He loves. He chose David, His servant, and took him from his sheepfolds. And that is what the Davidic covenant is all about. This is the fulfillment of one part of the Abrahamic covenant concerning kingship will remain in Judah until the Messiah comes. Now this Psalm basically is about the Mosaic Covenant. It highlights how the people have been unfaithful to God in keeping the Mosaic Covenant. But it highlights Ephraim in failing to keep God's covenant. And the purpose of this psalm is to explain why God did not choose Ephraim, but choose Judah. Again, you see, God has already said way back that kingship will remain in Judah. But as it worked out in the history of Israel, that the Ephraimites did not obey God, and they were not chosen. And David was chosen because he was a man after God's own heart. Again, we see divine sovereignty and human responsibility. But this psalm is basically about the Mosaic Covenant. But you see how it leads into the Davidic Covenant. And now we look at the Davidic Covenant itself. This psalm is written after the exile, or perhaps even during the exile. And the psalmist prays, "You have said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David my servant, I will establish your offspring forever and build your throne for all generations. But now you have cast off and rejected. You are full of wrath against your anointed. You have renounced the covenant with your servant. You have defiled his crown in the dust. How long, O Lord, will you hide yourself forever? How long will your wrath burn like fire? Lord, where is your steadfast love of old, which by your faithfulness you swore to David?" David's kingdom's no more. The exile, they don't see a Davidic king. So they raise this question: is the Davidic covenant still valid? And we saw that was answered in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. This psalm shows that this was a real issue. That's why God, in His grace and mercy, inspired 1st and 2nd Chronicles to answer this question. Yes, the Davidic covenant is still relevant. God has not rejected David. They can look forward to the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. So these Psalms look forward to that fulfillment. And sure enough, in the Psalms, we have the Messiah. Psalm 2, verse 7. Originally, Psalm 2 is a psalm to be sung and recited by the new king on his coronation. Psalm 2:7 says, "The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel." Now, in its original context, "You are my son" here refers to the new king. But we saw Hebrews 1:5 quoted 2:7 and applied to Jesus Christ. "You are my son, today I have begotten you," together with quoting 1 Chronicles 17. "I'm a father to him." Again, did the book of Hebrews take it out of context? No. Look carefully. These Psalms go on to say, "Ask for me, I will make the nation your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession." Now remember, Genesis 49 verse 10, "Kingship will remain in Judah until the coming of the Messiah. To him belongs the nations." So this prayer, strictly speaking, can only be prayed by the Messiah. "I will make you the nations your heritage, the earth your possession." No David king, human Davidic king, will ever be able to claim this promise. Only the Messiah. So in a sense, Psalm 2 is actually about the Messiah, even though in its original context it was about Davidic king. But only the Messiah is qualified to truly claim this. "You shall break them with iron, a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces." Only the Messiah will fulfill this. And sure enough, Psalm 110 is a psalm that is strictly talking about the Messiah. "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." Psalm 2, originally context, it was referring to a Davidic king, human one, but can only be fulfilled by the Messiah. Psalm 110, strictly speaking, is only applicable to the Messiah right from the start. It's not referring to any human Davidic king, unlike Psalm 2. Why? It is a Psalm of David. Here David is praying. "The Lord said to my Lord, sit here at my right hand until I make your footstool, your enemies your footstool." Now remember, Jesus quoted this to argue that the Messiah is more than God. He asked the Jews, quoting this psalm, "Whose son is the Messiah, the Lord?" "David's son." Then he said, "How come David here called his son my Lord?" See, the Lord refers to the God of the Old Testament. My Lord refers to the Messiah. So the only explanation is this: the my Lord is the Messiah, a future descendant of David. And especially verse 4, talking about priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. You see, priest was limited to the tribe of Levi. The Messiah comes from the tribe of Judah, Davidic kings. So, strictly speaking, the Messiah cannot be a priest because priests must come from Levites. But then here, God promised something new. A priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, not after the order of Levi. And the book of Hebrews cited this and expounded on this, how Christ is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So Psalm 110 can only refer to the Messiah, nobody else. So therefore you see, the book of Psalms include the Messiah. Now what is the significance of this? Let's continue and look at Psalm 96 to see the significance. Why I call this the Great Commission? Read Psalm 96. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord, O peoples of families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness, the peoples. Look at the emphasis on all the earth, the nations, all the peoples, and so on. This psalm can only be fulfilled after the Messiah has come. And this actually describes the Great Commission. Make disciples of all nations. So this, in retrospect, is actually about the Great Commission. After the coming of the Messiah, he is Lord. And therefore, declare to the peoples that he is God. The Lord reigns, and so on. So therefore, you see, even called to sing a new song. And a new song is a song about the Messiah in view of how this psalm is fulfilled. With this in mind, we want to look at the significance of the psalms, including all these elements. In other words, their hymn book, in their singing, they refer to or recount all these key elements in God's redemptive plan. Therefore, when we sing, we need to remember we are also affirming, testifying to God's redemptive plan. Now, note that the New Covenant is not highlighted, it's still in white. I cannot find a psalm that actually sing about the New Covenant. I think the reason is simple. They must sing about something that they can experience in some way. The New Covenant about the Messiah coming to die on the cross is something they could not imagine. They cannot experience in any way. So it makes sense why there is no psalm on the New Covenant. But we saw in Psalm 96, sing a new song. In retrospect, that new song, as I mentioned, will be the song about the New Covenant, about the Messiah. This new song should be added to the old songs that sing about the creation mandate, the Noahic Covenant, the Abrahamic Covenant. And that was what happened to the early church until the 17th century. The book of Psalms is a hymn book of the church. So they sang the Psalms. But what about the New Covenant? Christians should also sing the new song about the Messiah, the New Covenant. Not just in terms of him reigning, he reigns, but also his death on the cross. Therefore, there is a place based on this framework and based on what we saw in Psalms, especially Psalm 96, for the church to write new hymns, new songs, to add to the book of Psalms. In fact, this is what we see in the teaching of Paul. Ephesians 5:18, Colossians 3:15. We have looked at these two passages before with different emphasis. Now we want to emphasize on speaking in Psalms. You see, do not get drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. What happens when you are filled with the Spirit? Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Same thing with Colossians 3:15. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you. What happens when the word of Christ or word about Christ dwell richly in you? Word about Christ, His death, His resurrection, and so on, dwell richly within you. What happens? Teaching and admonishing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. So you see, when we are filled with the Spirit, when we are filled with the word of Christ, word about Christ, we teach one another, admonishing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Therefore, there is a place still for the psalms to be sung. You see, when we sing the psalms, we are singing to one another, not just to God. We are admonishing one another. When we sing the word about Christ, the word about Christ dwell richly, actually should be translated among you. So we sing the word about Christ, the word dwell richly among us. So this go hand in hand with being filled with the Spirit. So this gives us an added dimension to what we talk about, that the Psalms is a tool for the renewing of mind, transformation of life. Here we added the dimension of the Spirit, being filled with the Spirit, and the word about Christ. Word about Christ that is not seen in the Old Testament, not fulfilled in the Old Testament, His death and so on, that they could not sing about in the Old Testament, but now we can sing about in the New Testament. So singing to one another is also an important means in life transformation, renewing of the mind, because by doing that, we admonish one another. Therefore, we need to look at the words that we sing to one another in worship. There are some songs, they are richer. There are some songs where there's hardly anything that is worth singing about. So we need to be discerning, using the book of Psalms as a paradigm and the teaching of Paul. Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs that will work in our hearts and mind in terms of God's redemption. By the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of mind. So now we can see how we can merge the Psalms with hymns and songs for the purpose of renewing the mind, life transformation. So the book of Psalms gives us that paradigm. Note, the key dimension of God's redemption is included in the Psalms. That means in our singing of hymns. The traditional hymns have no problem. The hymns can be classified doctrinally, Christ, birth, resurrection, and so on. So much teaching on God's redemption in the hymns. Unfortunately, the hymns, which replaced the Psalms hundreds of years ago, being replaced by contemporary songs. I'm not saying the contemporary songs are bad. They are very good ones. My favorite one is Christ Alone. It's wonderful how it spells out Christ's redemption. So beautiful. And there are a number of contemporary songs that are so beautiful. But we need to be discerning. Do these words really do what the book of Psalms tells us it will do? It will change the way we think, change the way we feel, change the way we will, change the way we act. Will it transform us? So the Psalms, together with what we see in Ephesians and Colossians, gives us an important understanding of what it means to sing. But of course, in the case of Psalms, we can recite it even individually. That can also change our thinking and feeling. We have looked at this chart before, Jesus and Mosaic Law, and see how the laws in the Old Testament are relevant to us. Before we want to move on to see how the Psalms can be adequately used for the purpose we have just discussed, we want to quickly review how the laws in the Old Testament are relevant to us, because this is perhaps new to most of us. After hearing that session, we may not have a clear enough understanding of the role of the Old Testament, including the Old Testament law, in how God can change our lives. So we want to focus on the Mosaic Law. 10 Commandments and the laws are obsolete, replaced, because they are fulfilled, but not abolished, which means the purpose of these laws are still valid. So we need to look at the purpose of this law to see how they are relevant to us. We need to know the purpose of this law. The moral law, there's no problem. The 10 Commandments is binding. The civil law, they are applications of the 10 Commandments, the moral law, in a nation. For example, we saw how farmers have to leave the corners unharvested for widows to come. That is a civil law. It is application of the moral law. Love your neighbors yourself. You shall not covet. It is directly relevant. It's relevant because it is application of the moral law. But we can't practice this. Most of us are not farmers. What it means is, it is an application of the moral law in that particular context, in an agriculture economy. But it is directly relevant, which means we can use this example to see how we can do something similar, how we can put the purpose of that law into practice. The purpose is so that widows, those who have no means to make a living, have a chance to make a living using their own hands, not free hand out. That means that civil law is relevant to us directly in the sense that we need to do something similar. We need to make it possible for those who cannot make a living, no means to make a living somehow. Therefore, an application of the church is Christian growth have, for example, formed NGOs to help the blind make a living in some ways. So this is an example how the civil law can be applied by Christians today and by the government to help those who are marginalized, who have no means to make a living. It can be a law in the nation for that, and Christians can put that and apply in the context of the church. So that is what it means by the purpose is valid, and we look at the civil law, we look at the purpose and how we can fulfill the purpose in our modern context. The ceremonial law, we see it is indirectly relevant. Indirectly because it is not application of the moral law, but it is still relevant because the purpose of the ritual purity. And we saw how this is fulfilled in terms of, in whatever you do, whether eat or drink, do it to the glory of God. Ritual purity was needed because God is holy. God's temple is holy. God manifested himself in the temple of Testament, so they must be ritually pure. So they need to observe ritual purity. There are certain food they can eat, certain food they cannot eat, and when they touch a dead body, they must go to purification. Those things are no longer obsolete. We don't practice those things anymore. But the purpose, ritual purity. And we saw how, because we are the temple of Holy Spirit, to practice ritual purity, we must glorify God in our body in areas that are not even moral. Because holiness is not just moral, but non-moral. So non-moral purity is to do even in the areas that are not moral, eating and drinking to glorify God. So we see how the purpose is fulfilled. In this sense, I call it indirectly relevant. Now, this is to lay the foundation for me to highlight the importance of the feasts and festivals. Because the singing of psalms come under this part of the Sabbath law. We saw the sacrifices are relevant because there's still a need for the purpose of the sacrifice, for sins to be forgiven. Therefore, it's still relevant, but it's indirectly relevant. We don't practice sacrifices, but we receive forgiveness through Christ. The Sabbath, there is moral, civil, and ceremonial. We have looked at the moral and civil. Now we want to focus on ceremonial, the feasts and the festivals. How are the feasts and the festival relevant to us today? It's indirectly relevant. I highlight this also because there is a concern in some sectors here about the festivals. There are some groups here that talk about Christian need to observe the festivals. No, Paul said, no more. And he scolded the Galatians and said, I feel I wasted my time on you when they begin to practice the festivals. So how are the festivals relevant to us today? They are part of the Sabbath law, the ceremonial aspect of the Sabbath law. Now, let's go back to the context of Israel. We saw how, because of God creating the world, making the world in 6 days and rest on the 7th day, they need to keep the Sabbath, the 7th day, as holy. So the Sabbath represented God's creation. And in the case of Israel, their redemption from Egypt. Remember, the Deuteronomy version of the Ten Commandments gave redemption of Israel as the basis for the Sabbath law. So when they keep the Sabbath, they remember God's creation as well as remember the redemption for Israel. And the redemption of Israel is even more elaborately commemorated through the Passover and the unleavened bread. That is part of Sabbath law, the ceremonial aspect. So the Passover enabled them to remember they came out of Egypt in haste. Remember the fact of leaving Egypt and the feeling they left in haste. Therefore, they cannot eat leavened bread, they eat unleavened bread. And then the feast of booth or tabernacle, they have to live in tents for a week to remember their sojourn in the wilderness. They live in tents. And then the feast of weeks of the Pentecost, they have to give the first fruits, offer first fruit to remember God's redemption. How when they came out of Egypt into the promised land, God gave them harvest. So they'll remember God's redemption, coming out of Egypt in the wilderness and into Canaan. And then they also observe the Day of Atonement, which is spiritual salvation. So through all these festivals, they experience and recall physical salvation as well as spiritual salvation. So you see, what happens is when they practice the feast, they actually commemorate their history, God's redemptive plan. In this way, they begin to live in the stories. This is very important for them to remember that this is their history, to live in their history, to live out their history. Now, this is where the purpose is crucial for the church in using the Psalms. The Psalms enable those who recite the Psalm to live in that redemptive story. We saw how creation mandate and so on are all in the Psalms. So when people recite the Psalm or sing the Psalm, they begin to live in that story. For the church, we also learn to live in that story. When we look at the festivals and how the Passover is now being upgraded to the Lord's Supper. And at the Lord's Supper, we remember Christ's death and look forward to his coming. And the baptism is to remember that we are baptized into Christ. We are grafted into the story of Israel. So when we practice baptism and the Lord's Supper, we are extending the story that we read in the Old Testament. So we also live in the story. So when we sing the psalm, read the psalm, we live into the story. That helps us to recognize that this is the true story of the world and we live in the story. It is important for us to recognize which story we live in. If we truly believe in Jesus, we have been grafted into that story, creation and so on. And we have believed in Christ and his coming. So we live in that story. If we truly live in that story, in reality and not just in theory, it affects how we live. That one day Christ will come back, that the best is not in this world. We will live in light of that reality. If someone lives as though there is no God, there is no spiritual reality, when we die, that is the end of everything. He's living out the story of the theory of evolution. A person may theoretically believe, so-called, in Christ, but the story he's living out is not the story of redemption that we are talking about, but the story of evolution. So, which story are we really living in? That is demonstrated with how we actually live, why we live. Our motivation in life will tell us which story we are living in. It's so easy for us in this world to conform to this world, the thinking of this world, and live according to the story of this world. That the best is in this world. We must compete. The survival of the fittest, so that we get the best of this world. If we don't get the best of this world, we miss everything. But we live in the story of redemption. What we see in the history of Israel and what is portrayed in the Psalms, we live differently. The best is not in this world. So I hope this will give us an understanding how the Psalms can empower us in terms of renewing of our mind. Now, what is important is this. When we recite the Psalms, we don't live in the story as spectators. We live as participants. Look at how the psalmist phrase this stanza. The Lord is my portion. I promise to keep your words. When I think on my ways, I turn my feet to your testimonies. I hasten and do not delay to keep your commandments. Though the cause of the wicked ensnare me, I do not forget your law. At midnight I rise to praise you because of your righteous rules. I am a companion of all who fear you, of those who keep your precept. See again, precept, rules, commandments, law, testimony, basically your words. Now, when a person recites this psalm, he's making a promise. I promise to keep your words. I promise to turn my feet to your testimonies. I promise to keep your commandments. In other words, when we recite the psalm or sing the psalm, we don't only participate in the history as portrayed in the Psalms, but we are actually making decisions within that story that will enable us to really feel that we are living in that story. That will change our mind, renew our mind, and turn us away from whatever story we used to live in, the story of theory of evolution, to the story of God's redemption. So you see how reciting the psalm enables us to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Now, we want to look at a set of psalms that troubles Christians. We want to make sense of them by themselves and see how it fits into making sense of the psalm as a tool for life transformation. For example, look at Psalm 44. O God, we have heard with our ears, our Father have told us, you with your own hand drove out the nations, but them you planted. If we have forgotten the name of our God, or spread our hands to a foreign God, would not God discover this? For he knows the secret of the heart. Awake, why are you sleeping, O Lord? Rouse yourself, do not reject us forever. Rise up, come to our help. Redeem us for the sake of your steadfast love. This is an example of what is called Psalm of Lament. The psalmist is lamenting because the nation was defeated in battle and they are suffering. They did no wrong, but yet God seems to have rejected them. So the psalmist is lamenting. Many of the laments are not so extreme in terms of how they address God. But in this particular lament, look at verse 23. Awake, why are you sleeping? The psalmist is saying, God, you are sleeping on the job. In other words, he is so disappointed with God that he tells exactly how he felt. Well, is it the right way to speak to God? Is this a model prayer? How to make sense of this as a model prayer? And this is not the only psalm like this. There are other psalms. In fact, there are more psalms of lament than there are psalms of praise and thanksgiving. And there are many psalms like this where the psalmist expresses how he feels about God when he's upset with God, when he's disappointed with God, or when he's angry with God. Can we really tell God how we feel about Him? The psalmist does that. This only psalm. This is a model psalm. How do we make sense of it? Note carefully. The psalmist in this very psalm highlight that God is all-powerful. Your hand drove out the nations. He highlights that God is all-knowing. If we have forgotten the name of God, spread our hands to foreign God, would not God know? You know the secrets of the heart. God is all-powerful and God is all-knowing. And He said, redeem us for the sake of the steadfast love. God is all-loving. You see, these psalms, even in those words that expresses disappointment with God, are expressions that assume that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. You see, the fact that he's upset with God, disappointed with God, shows that he believed God is all-powerful. God could have saved them, but God did not save them. If God is not all-powerful, there's no reason to complain to God because God couldn't help it. So the very fact that they complain to God shows that they believe God is all-powerful. So by the very complaint, they're actually acknowledging God is all-powerful. And they are acknowledging God is all-knowing, because when they're angry with God, is it more spiritual to keep quiet? Does God know? Surely God knows. So when they express exactly how they feel, they're actually acknowledging that God is all-knowing. God knows how I feel. No point keep quiet. Might as well tell Him outright. And the fact that they dare to tell God exactly how they feel, they believe that God is all-loving. You will not dare to tell God how you feel unless you believe that God is all-loving. So you see, by telling God how they feel, they are upholding three very important truths about God. God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. In fact, unless we believe that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving, there's no basis to pray. We can't pray unless we assume that God is all-powerful. Otherwise, we pray all-knowing and all-loving. So therefore, when we are angry with God, we can't help it unless we tell God exactly how we feel. The Psalms are to guide us. We don't believe God is all-powerful. We don't believe God is all-knowing. We don't believe God is all-loving. We cannot pray anymore. So the Psalms are to help us to deal with situations when we are angry with God. There are also times where we are so angry with someone who have done us harm. This is example. Be not silent, O God of my praise, for wicked and deceitful mouths are opened against me, speaking against me with lying tongues. In return for my love, they accuse me, but I give myself to prayer, for they reward me evil for good and hatred for love. Appoint a wicked man against him. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. May his days be few. May another take his office. May his children be fatherless and his wife be widow. You see, the psalmist here is cursing his enemy, someone who have harmed him in return for his love. This could be David praying concerning Saul. David was so good to Saul, and Saul was pursuing to kill him. Can we curse people in our prayers? How do we make sense of a psalm like this? Again, this is important in terms of renewing our mind. Now, this could be this is a psalm of David. It could be when David was running away from Saul. Remember, when David and his men had chance to kill Saul 2 times, David refused to do that. This may explain why. Because he expressed all his anger towards Saul to God. He expressed his feelings towards God so that he no longer feel it. He recognizes that God is just, God will punish evil, and he recognizes God said, vengeance is mine, he should not take vengeance. So he released all those things to God so that he no longer carry them. Therefore, he could love Saul. So when he actually found Saul sleeping, he could love him. So this is important. When we are in a situation where someone has harmed us so badly that we just feel like killing him, we need to deal with it. We need to express that feeling to God, not to the person. You see, unless we deal with this feeling and express to God, it will come out in one way or another when dealing with the person. Why is this important? Look at this psalm. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem, how they say, lay it bare, down to its foundations. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to be destroyed, blessed shall he be who repays you with what you have done to us. Blessed shall he be who takes your little one and dash them against a rock, against cursing. This is what we call imprecation. Imprecate, to utter a curse against the enemies. This is in the context of the Babylon exile. They suffered so much under Babylon. The Edomite, actually, their relative, declared, lay it bare, lay the foundation. So the psalmist is so disappointed, so angry with the Babylonians and the Edomites that he imprecated them, he prayed. Now, this is not just in the Psalms. Moses, Deborah, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, and even Paul has used similar words before. So there is a place for this kind of words addressed towards God, not towards enemies. That is the key thing, towards God. Now, Psalm 119 is about people who suffered themselves. Psalm 137 can be uttered by people who are not the victim. For example will be the Holocaust. Tremendous evil. Based on Psalm 137, we can utter a similar prayer against those who perpetrated the Holocaust evil. Why? This is from Clinton McCann. He is commenting on Psalm 137. He says, in the face of monstrous evil, the worst possible response is to feel nothing. What must be felt by the victims and on behalf of the victims are grief, rage, and outrage. In the absence of these feelings, evil becomes an acceptable commonplace. In other words, to forget is to submit to evil, to wither and die. To remember is to resist and to be faithful and to live again. In other words, in the face of evil, whether we are the victims or on behalf of the victim, we must feel rage against evil. And the Psalms enable us to express that rage to God, not to people, to God. In this way, we cultivate anger, rage against evil. If we don't do that, evil becomes commonplace. Evil means nothing to us. We look at evil, we feel nothing. This kind of Psalms, imprecation, help us provoke in us outrage against evil. And when we do that, and we pray like that, we ask God to punish evil. we are inviting God to punish us if we do the same thing. This is well expressed in Psalm 139. Famous Psalm. Verse 1 says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me, and so on. God is all-knowing. And then there is an implication. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not love those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Implication against God's enemy. Hatred, outrage against evil. Now this is spoken to God, not to the people. And having said that, the psalmist says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. And see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way of lasting. You see, we cannot pray this kind of prayer and ask God to punish evil without thinking of ourselves. So the psalmist says, search me, search me. So you see, this kind of prayer has a place in cultivating hatred against sin in others and in ourselves. You see, Romans 12:1-2 say, because of what Christ has done, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Present it. That means turn away from sin, repent, and from now on live for Christ. And then do not be conformed, but be transformed. Do not be conformed, but be transformed is how to live out that dedication to God. But that dedication must come in light of Christ. So this kind of prayer will enable us to make that first stage of dedication, to have hatred against sin, and to realize that Christ has died for my sin. Therefore, I dedicate my life to serve Him, to live for Him, to do good, and then do not be transformed, but be transformed. And I've seen how the Psalms can help us do that. So you see, taken together, the Psalm is a powerful tool for spiritual formation. Unfortunately, this has been neglected. So I hope in this very brief meditation aloud that we gain a new perspective on the book of Psalms as we make sense of how the Psalms are songs to be sung or to be recited, and as a tool for life transformation.